Welcome to Ryco Workshop Heroes. I'm Luke Oxley and today we are at Perkins Engineering where we're going to take a closer look at some of these awesome Holden race cars. Alright, we're looking for Mr. Jack Perkins. Oh, here he is.
G'day, Luke.
Nice to meet you, yeah. Just admiring these awesome, very nostalgic for me. I grew up with these VP and VP era Commodores. It's fantastic to see them back in their original form, I guess.
Yeah, these have been a massive undertaking. I started this one in 2016 and this one not long after. This is the 93 Bathurst winning Commodore. So it's the first Bathurst my dad won in his own team. Because the first three he won with Peter Brock at HDT. So this is a pretty cool thing for Dad and the business that he built. And this was the last time a Aussie Holden engine was under the bonnet, because this year, the 94 car, which we're doing for a customer, this is the first year of the Chev. So they're pretty cool cars because from the outside they kind of look the same, but underneath they're quite different, and they've both got their own stories as well. So it's kind of cool.
Let's start with this one. I remember this. I was in high school when this happened, but it was a pretty big deal, wasn't it? 1993. Yeah,
it's funny because Dad never actually maintained ownership of race cars. You always had to build one, use it, sell it to pay for the next one. And the business had built 49 supercars in 25 years of business, and this one was actually number 17, so chassis 17. And they set about the brand new post Group A, the 5-litre touring car rules. So you could use a Holden or a Chev engine, or if you're a Ford, you'd run a Ford engine. The Holden guys had McPherson strut front suspension, whereas the Falcons still had double wishbone, but they all integrated the Ford 9-inch rear end. And the body kits and the aero were pretty similar. I think the Ford version of a VP is about an EA Falcon, something like that, so the rear wing was about the same, all that sort of stuff. So 93 Bathurst was pretty unique because we were just a one-car team. The Glenn Seaton had 2 cars with Peter Jackson. Gibson Motorsport had 2 Winfield cars for Scaife, who was sharing with Jim Richards, and a second car running. But for Dad, he was running throughout the season, then had to grab Greg Hansford as a co-driver who actually didn't drive throughout the year. So it was almost a David versus Goliath battle because Greg Hansford was racing against Jim Richards, who was Mark Scaife's co-driver, but they had been in the cars all year. So it was very, very challenging. But throughout the week at Bathurst, they were quickest in every practice session. Wednesday,
you guys dominated
Thursday.
that year, didn't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And I shouldn't take credit myself because I was only a little nipper, but obviously I'm quite proud of the event and everything. So yeah, quickest in all the practice sessions, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, quickest in qualifying, pole position in the top 10 shootout, and won the race with the fastest lap. So really cool thing. And we set about thinking about getting this car back for many years, but it was challenging, and we ended up getting it back in 2016 and set about the meticulous restoration, sort of as it was in 93.
I didn't realise, you were saying earlier, this was actually lived its life as a VR Commodore after this.
Yeah, so basically, and I shouldn't say all, but 98% of VPs across the board, whether it be Perkins or Holden Racing Team, they all got upgraded to VR and then eventually VS because it was easier than building new cars, especially when you'd sold this to a privateer. So we sold this car to John Trimble and then on to James Rosenberg, who ran it with Mark Poole as a privateer. In 1996, they converted it to a VR Commodore. So a lot of the bodywork or the profile of the car stayed the same, but the back half especially got a lot of adjustments, parcel shelves, rear quarter panels, and that sort of thing. Doors stayed the same, bonnets and headlights and a few of the bolt-on things changed, but the rear track got a bit wider with the VRVS, and then over time people started hot rodding the cars, putting more roll cage tubing in and doing all that sort of stuff. So they went through a very serious phase of evolution, and people kept racing them. This one was still running in sort of 2014, 2015 in a Victorian State Series sports sedans.
Oh wow.
So it had a Chev engine in it by then, and had a few other hot rod bits on it. But
so you basically had to start from scratch.
Yeah, and starting from scratch in restoration terms is so much harder than building something from new. So when we stripped it back to a bare shell, we had to get rid of all the VRVS stuff. So parcel shelf, as I touched on, quarters, but there was 32 kilos of additional roll cage tubing welded in to try and make the chassis stiffer. So I don't know who did that, but they didn't do a very good job because there was some of the roll cage tubing wasn't even welded the whole way around, so it was kind of expensive ballast. But yeah, so it stripped it right back, and then, you know, using photos, drawings, leaning on old staff members for history and bits and pieces, we were able to kind of recreate to the best of our ability what we presented on the grid at Bathurst in 93. And yeah, we're on the home stretch now. We're very close, but it's been, yeah, I mean, when I started this program in 2016, I hadn't even met my wife. So it's it feels like I've, you know, been doing this for a long time.
What about the aero? Like, how do you go about, can you still purchase this sort of, or get it made?
Yeah, well, to show the VP stuff was quite difficult to find because a lot of the people that upgraded them never hung on to anything.
Yeah.
So aero is a good question. We had to dig out the original moulds, and we got our original composites guy to remanufacture these. So Richard Struthers, who's the composites guy, is a guru. He started with Dad in about 84 when they made the big banger body kit for the V8 Commodore. Yeah. And that's when he first met Dad, and right through the business he did all this stuff. So he remanufactured our front bars for us. We had to remanufacture the rear wings and the end plates. And then a lot of road car stuff we had to source. I actually destroyed 3 VP road cars, just cutting up bits. Because you can't ring up a dealer and buy a parcel shelf or new headlights and stuff like that.
Hey,
so
you're probably lucky you purchased them a few years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I bought one from Mildura for $300.
Yeah.
And now they're about $3,000.
Yeah.
And that was just for bits. And it was nice coming from somewhere in Mildura. There wasn't a lot of rust in it, but we tried to find as much new old stock as we could. So I found a new old stock bonnet, front guards, rear quarter panels, boot lids, are all in the black GM boxes, which was a lot, thankfully, because of our Facebook page. We'd built up 30,000 people, and it became like a modern day newsletter.
It's amazing what people have got sitting in a shed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. And one man's trash is another man's treasure. You know, I had to get body sides and all sorts, but people, especially old dealers and wrecking yards and panel beaters, they've got SHIT like this lying around. And when they know that, you know, someone like us is looking for it, they're either happy to help you out or they whack a big price tag on it and they want to make money out of it. But in any case, finding the bits was the most crucial thing for us, and nothing on these cars is like Chinese counterfeits or anything like that. No aftermarkets. It's all new old stock or off a donor road card, all GM stuff. So someone offered me some Toyota Lexan parts, and they are made by GM, but I just couldn't sort of have a Toyota part number on something that was always GM. But so yeah, every sort of part of the car's got a really cool little tail, so it's cool.
So the engine's not in it?
No, we can pop the bonnet because the engine, which is the last Holden engine's just down at Walkinshaw Racing, where we're utilising their dyno. So we'll have that engine hopefully running on the dyno very soon, and then it's ready to go back in. I've just got some anti-scratch stuff there. I'm very delicate with my engine in and out removal, so but it's basically ready for the motor, which is exciting, and it's the original engine, so we were able to track down the original engine, which is really, you know, a neat part of the restoration, obviously having matching numbers. So the original engine will go back in, and then, yeah, it's basically tidy up the wiring and a few odd jobs and then prepare it for the circuit. We'll have to, you know, bleed the brakes, bleed the clutch and get all the fluids, everything, get the engine running, and then drop the car on the ground and do all the suspension settings, and we should be pretty right to go and give it a fang. This was one of the harder parts. The cars had VRVS dashboards in them. So, you know, again, from the donor car, we had to get a VP dashboard, put all the analog gauges back in. This car uses a PI system, but it was never mounted in the dash cluster. And then redo all the switch tower. The original switch tower was still in the car, but redid all the signage. The original SAS seat we actually found. Funny story, and the guy that got it off us gave it back to me. We got it recovered. We've put new seat belts in. I've got the original seat belts, but they probably...
That was the original seat in the car?
Yeah. So, someone bought it off us, and then they discovered that they didn't need it and knew I was doing this and gifted it back to me, which is pretty neat. So we've redone that. We just recovered it because the upholstery was pretty ordinary. And then, so we got rid of all the roll cage tubing that was added in, and all the bar works all back to how it was. And then in the rear end, it had been updated to a Watts linkage, whereas it raced in 93 with a Panhard rod. So we got rid of all the Watts linkage stuff, put the Panhard system back in, and the original diff housing was actually still with the car as a spare. So it was sort of passed along through the owners, and we were able to identify various parts on it and photos and some part numbers to suggest that it was the real deal. Re-anodized all my calipers, so the original Harrop calipers, all re-anodized, resurfaced, ready to go.
So this is all the original colour they were?
Yeah, so everything was redone as close as possible. We had to try different anodizers and things to get all the right colour matches. I spoke to Ron Harrop about the procedures they used back in the day to really try and recreate exactly what was here. It's really cool. We just make new brake lines now, and basically then the brake system will work. We got new Harrop rotors, both front and rear, who originally manufactured them, and they remanufactured to the same spec. Brake hats, everything's, if we couldn't source the original, we remanufactured something to match. So
that's one key difference between these two cars, isn't it? The rear end's a bit different in the...
Yeah, so like I said, when the VPs kept running as VRVSs, people would upgrade them. So whether it be roll cage tubing, cockpit adjustable roll bars, or in this case, it's got a Watts linkage in there. It's configured for Panhard because in '94 they actually swapped both at the circuit. So at the moment we've got it configured for Panhard, but it's got all the Watts linkage brackets and odds and ends in there. And just little differences, like this is actually a one-piece composite bar, kind of like the front bar. Whereas on this particular car, it's a road car rear bar with stick-on attachments. And that's how it was in '93. And we could see from photos that the bolts were painted on this car, and then on this car they weren't painted. So everything that we've seen, massive attention to detail.
Until you see them side by side though, you don't really notice these things so much, do you?
No, and that's what people wonder why it takes so long to restore. It's because we're trying to do our best. But this is like a fiberglass composite part, like I said, like the front bar, came out of a mold. And this has just started the evolution where they started to save weight, arguably steer a bit away from the road cars. And it's an interesting time because it's sort of where the money starts to ramp up now too. You've got cockpit adjustable roll bars, data recorders, Chevy engines. No doubt people started sneaking in wind tunnels and whatnot. So, you give a dog a bone and they run with it. But, it's pretty neat that we can kind of show two cars that look identical and cover off a few differences as well.
Now the boot is looking absolutely fantastic. That's one of the reasons we're here for.
Yeah, so...
For the Ryco filtration.
Yeah, we used Ryco filters for 25 years in business. So for us, it was a no-brainer to keep using all the Ryco gear because all the part numbers corresponded with everything we already had. But one of the key features to any restoration, but in particular these ones, was getting the specification right. And that's from drawings, documentation, and photos. And we've got, I'll grab this photo over here, but we've got some fantastic photos of the inside the boot from back in 1993, and we could really replicate a lot of the detail, whether it be cable ties, fuel pumps, and the trusty old Ryco filters. And even the boot stick was a piece of timber, which we're not replicating that much so far, but all of the breather hoses and the fuel system and everything we've tried to use as much of the original as possible. So when I first put the boot together, I obviously just ordered the part number filters and things that I needed, and the modern day filters are a slightly different colour. So I set about trying to find the colour match to eventually paint some filters to make them look like the old ones. And then I got to chat with a few of the guys at Ryco that share the passion that I do, and they went about not only getting the paint colour, but getting some period correct filters. So there I have an original Z39.
That's new old stock.
New old stock. And then we use Ryco throughout. So our oil filters on these cars is a Z115, and our different gearbox coolers we use as well. Both have Ryco filters on them. And it carried through to one of our last cars over in the workshop as well. The 2003 car uses all Ryco stuff. So for us to talk about the products we've always used, it's pretty straightforward. And I can't wait to have all this finished and running because it'll be exactly how it was, and nothing's out of spec, which is cool.
What's the plan with the cars once you've got them finished?
Yeah, so fortunately Dad and I own this one, and the 94 car is a customer's car, but doing both side by side in a restoration sense kind of gave us a better economy of scale. If we have to make one new part, making two makes it cheaper for both of us. So doing two side by side was a really good decision, not just for us, but obviously for a business, and for our customer. So I can't speak on behalf of what he's going to do with his car, whether he races it, puts it in a museum, or what, completely up to him. But I know that Dad and I want to take this car for a drive. You know, we probably wouldn't race it in the heat of the battle because God forbid someone scratch the bloody thing. But certainly want to take it for a drive. Greg Hansford passed away in '95. He's got 2 sons that I still speak to regularly. So I'd love for them to have a look at the car and even have a drive of it. But we would also like to take it to some various events, whether it be Phillip Island, Historics, Melbourne Grand Prix, Bathurst. I think obviously taking the car back to Bathurst would be a really neat thing to do. Hopefully these cars are finished sort of mid to late 2022 this year. This one, the 94 car, will definitely be ready because the engine's in it, kind of ready to go almost.
Well, let's have a look at that one.
Yeah.
This has got the Chevy
So
in it.
yeah, if we have a quick look.
So this is a 304.
So no, this is the 18-degree Chev.
Ah.
So the first year, the 18-degree Chevs, and
So this is quite similar to the.
well, so the boot is identical in some respects. We've just been mocking up some of the breather bottles and things, which are a little bit different because, you know, they use drink bottles and things, whatever they could find in the workshop. But the hardware with the high pressure pumps, the Holly Blues, the oil tank, fuel collector pots, fuel fillers, all the hardware is effectively the same. So we were able to, you know, the boots weren't heavily modified, which was pretty handy. And it's quite a unique Perkins thing, having this bit of steel down here, which is the mounting system for all those parts. So that was kind of all still there, which was handy. But the spare wheel tub, funnily enough, in both cars, where the spare wheel would sit in a road car Commodore, over time when you crashed them and whatnot, they were all bent and bowed. So that's another part that we used off donor cars. Just cut that section out, grafted it in. Quite nice. And then if we sort of work our way forward, the nuances, like clearly when they built this one with the white parcel shelf, they would have got reflection in the rear screen, so they decided this one needed to be flat black.
Yep.
So this is the basics of evolution. We were able to find brand new old stock Pilkington glass to match our VP quarter panels. And then this is the start of driver cooling, so a knacker duct to feed some air into the driver, whereas these were all glass windows. You just used to crank the window down to get some air in the car, and you see inside these were the original fiberglass door trims, so we only utilised the road car handle, a windscreen washer bottle mounted back here for corner weight distribution to help wash the front windscreen if that got dirty.
So it just became a little bit more race car-ish.
Yeah, just
in this model.
Slight evolution. And then if you come in the front door here, those with an eagle eye will probably notice cockpit adjustable roll bars, PI system dashboard mounted in the centre dash cluster, and just a few more sensors, a bit more wiring. As you say, evolution. It's got a lap timer in it, poking out the side here for part of the dashboard. And then moving forward again, we've got the front rotors on, our Harrop front rotors are on, and the front end's nearly complete, ready to go. And then under the hood, this is the 18-degree Chevy motor. So this has already been rebuilt and dynoed, ready to go. We've been assembling some new oil lines, but there's a shortage of parts coming from America, just with the COVID stuff. So we're just waiting for some more Earls fittings and braided line to come in. We could get Speedflow or other brands of fittings, but we used Earls, so I've been waiting 6 months for some fittings and stuff, but I can't afford to do any shortcuts at this stage of the game.
And you've got that remote filter. That's actually in a pretty accessible spot under there.
Yeah, so our engine oil filter has always had the housing mounted on the just above the chassis rail, and our trusty Ryco filter sits in there. So it would get a few stone chips and a bit of sand damage, but very easy to work on and change the filter. And then when you change engines in these cars, given that they run a dry sump and everything, you want to keep all that separate from the engine. So that's where it is, and the oil cooler sits up the front. And so that's all pretty neat. And I guess on the driver's side, like it's very similar again. You can crank the windows up and down for more or less cooling, and we found the original SAS seat for this car as well. So this car was sold to Peter Dillman and John Cotter, who were privateers from Sydney, and they still had this seat sitting up in the loft of their workshop, some 30 years later. So again, they were happy to donate that to the cause, and we got that one recovered and back in. And one of the last things we've had done was the sign writing. Our original sign writer, Pan Signs, Peter Davies, had all the original files and redid all the sign writing basically how it was. You know, when we painted it, one of the big things was to replicate everything how it was. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to clean the car and I could feel the edges of that.
Yeah.
And these days they would put clear over the top, you know, do it all in one coat and then clear it. Whereas back then it was painted the white and the black base coat, and then these would go on top. So that's what we redid. So a bit more work involved in all that. But
when this colour scheme came out, it looked unreal back in the day, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And it's funny because we set about getting a precise colour match thanks to our friends at PPG. So we were able to find some old panels and dig up a lot of the old colours, but the paint technology's kind of changed a bit, so we had to, you know, reformulate a few of them. But one thing that catches a few people out is like this black is actually a bit of a metallic black, and a lot of people don't realise that. They think it was just a standard black. So that's quite cool. When people see that, they get surprised. And this red, it's kind of a bit orangey.
It is a bit, isn't it?
When you compare it to like a Corvette red or something, but that's kind of how it was. I don't know whether it faded or whether that's what Castrol wanted, but everything we've matched to existing samples from the day. We found old parts and panels and stuff like that. So we were able to really recreate everything we could to with an nth degree.